My hands were shaking, actually physically shaking, as I stuffed the crumpled bank statement deep into the bottom of my lingerie drawer, underneath the bras I never wear anymore. It felt ridiculous, cliché even, hiding secrets like some character in a bad soap opera. But the fear churning in my stomach was sickeningly real. This wasn't just about money. It felt like I was hiding a piece of myself, a decision so monumental, so potentially catastrophic, that revealing it felt like pulling the pin on a grenade sitting right in the middle of our living room. Just 6 months ago, the thought would have been inconceivable. 6 months ago, Tyler and I were, well, we were us. Not perfect, never perfect, but solid. We had this rhythm, this comfortable dance built over 7 years, weathering job changes, apartment moves, the usual life stuff. We laughed a lot back then, didn't we? I remember lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets, the smell of his coffee brewing, the easy way he'd sling an arm around me while watching TV, his thumb tracing patterns on my shoulder. It felt safe, secure, like whatever life threw at us, we'd face it together, hand in hand, an unbreakable team. But somewhere along the line, the music started to fade. It wasn't one big event, no dramatic explosion. It was more like a slow leak, a gradual erosion. Tyler lost his job, the restructuring excuse that felt like a flimsy bandage over a gaping wound. He'd been the primary breadwinner, the steady rock, and suddenly, that foundation crumbled. He tried. God, he tried. Sent out resumes, networked, took freelance gigs that paid peanuts and chipped away at his confidence piece by piece. I watched him retreat, pulling into himself like a snail into its shell. The easy laughter vanished, replaced by tense silences and the constant low hum of anxiety. He stopped touching me with the same casual affection. Conversations became logistical nightmares, bills, job applications, cutting costs. The playful banter, the shared dreams, the connection, it all got buried under the weight of worry and unspoken resentment. I tried to be supportive, truly I did. I picked up extra shifts at the clinic, plastered a smile on my face, told him it would be okay. But inside, I was screaming. I felt desperately alone, like I was carrying the emotional load for both of us, while simultaneously watching the man I loved disappear before my eyes. The financial strain was immense, yes, but the emotional distance, that was the killer. It felt like we were roommates sharing a debt burden, not partners sharing a life. And the silence grew heavier each day, thick with unspoken fears and disappointments. It was in that suffocating silence that the first crack appeared, the tiny fissure that would eventually threaten to shatter everything. I just didn't know it yet. I was just trying to breathe. It's a lot to unpack, I know. But first, please like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these stories. It helps a lot. Okay, back to it. So, there we were, drowning in debt and unspoken tension. Tyler was either glued to his laptop, face grim, or pacing the apartment like a caged animal. Our attempts at date nights felt forced, the conversation stilted. He'd stare past me, lost in thought, and I'd feel this invisible wall between us, thicker and higher each day. I started sleeping poorly, waking up with my jaw clenched, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. I missed him. I missed the easy, intimacy, the feeling of being a team. I felt unseen, unheard, like a ghost haunting my own life. He wasn't intentionally cruel, I have to believe that. He was just drowning. And instead of holding on to me as a life raft, he was pushing me away, maybe afraid he'd pull me under too. But the result was the same. I was adrift, and terribly, terribly lonely. The apartment felt less like a home and more like a pressure cooker. Every ping of a bill notification email, every rejected job application confirmation Tyler received, just ratcheted up the tension. We started snapping at each other over stupid things, whose turn it was to take out the trash, the way I loaded the dishwasher. Tiny arguments that were never really about the dishwasher or the trash, but about the monumental stress crushing us both. And I started thinking dangerous thoughts. Not about leaving, not yet, but about escape. About needing something to change before I completely fractured. The silence in our apartment became deafening. It wasn't the comfortable silence we used to share, the kind where words weren't needed. This was a heavy, awkward silence, thick with unspoken resentment and disappointment. I remember one night vividly. I'd made his favorite meal, lasagna, the kind that takes hours, the kind he used to rave about. I set the table, lit a candle, hoping, just hoping, for a flicker of the old us. He came home late, mumbled something about a tough day, ate, quickly while scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging the effort, barely tasting the food. He thanked me, sure, a quick, dismissive, "Thanks, Meg, that was good," before retreating to the couch and the familiar blue light of his screen. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the leftover lasagna, the flickering candle casting, long shadows on the wall, and the loneliness was just overwhelming. It felt like I was screaming in an empty room. My chest physically ached. I tried talking to him again later that night, curled up at the opposite end of the sofa, the cushions, between us feeling like a vast canyon. I asked him, point blank, "Tyler, are we okay? Are you okay?" He just sighed, that weary sigh I'd come to dread, ran a hand over his face and said, "Megan, I'm just tired. Work is killing me. Can we not do this right now?" But right now became always. There was never a right time. My attempts to connect, to bridge the gap were consistently deflected, pushed aside until I just stopped trying as hard. What was the point? It felt like chipping away at granite with a plastic spoon. The emotional intimacy we once had felt like a mirage, something I could remember but could no longer grasp. I felt adrift, untethered from the person who was supposed to be my anchor. And that's when Kevin appeared. Almost out of nowhere, really. It wasn't dramatic. It started online, innocuously enough. A comment on a mutual friend's post, a shared interest in some niche hobby, classic obscure synth pop bands, I think. Ridiculous, right? But his messages were different. They weren't demanding, they weren't heavy. They were light, funny, engaging. He asked questions. He actually seemed interested in my answers, in my thoughts, my opinions. When I mentioned something about my day, he'd follow up, remember details. It sounds so basic, I know, but after months of feeling like background noise in my own life, it felt like sunshine, a tiny sliver of warmth breaking through the perpetual gray fog I'd been living in. His name would pop up on my screen, and I'd feel this little jolt, this flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in ages. It was attention. Pure, simple, undivided attention. And God, I soaked it up like a dying plant in the rain. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Harmless flirting, a distraction. Tyler was so wrapped up in his own world, he wouldn't even notice. And honestly, he didn't. My phone would buzz, I'd smile, type back a reply, and he'd be none the wiser, lost in his game or his stress. A part of me felt guilty, of course. This secret little spark I was nurturing felt like a betrayal, even if it was just words on a screen. But another, stronger part, the part starved for connection, whispered justifications. It's just talking. He makes me feel good. Tyler doesn't give me this. I deserve to feel seen. The rationalizations piled up, building a shaky defense against the rising tide of guilt. Kevin wasn't Tyler. He didn't know our history, our struggles, the life Tyler and I had built, however fractured it felt now. He just saw me, Megan. Not Tyler's distant partner, but a woman with thoughts and interests worth exploring. The contrast was stark. With Tyler, conversations felt like wading through mud. With Kevin, they flowed effortlessly, witty banter mixed with surprisingly deep discussions about everything and nothing. It felt easy. Too easy. The messages became more frequent, the conversations longer, stretching late into the night sometimes. Long after Tyler had fallen asleep beside me, oblivious, the digital connection started to feel real, substantial. He started talking about meeting up. Just for coffee, he said. Casual, no pressure. My heart leaped at the suggestion, a thrill mixed with immediate, ice-cold panic. Meet him? In person? That felt different. dangerous, crossing a line that up until then had only existed in the abstract realm of pixels and text. It was one thing to exchange witty messages online. It was another entirely to sit across from him, to see if this connection held up in the real world. The guilt intensified, battling fiercely with the intoxicating pull of being wanted, of feeling that spark of interest from someone new. Standing at that crossroads, the temptation was immense, a siren call promising, what? Understanding? Escape? Or just a different kind of complication? The thought lodged itself in my brain, a persistent hum beneath the surface of my daily life, making the silence with Tyler feel even heavier, the distance even wider. The idea of that coffee meeting hung in the air, a possibility charged with potential energy, both thrilling and terrifying. What would happen if I said yes? Saying yes to coffee felt like stepping off a ledge in slow motion. Part of me was screaming, "Abort! Go back! This is insane!" While the other part, the starved, lonely part, was already picking out an outfit. The internal battle was exhausting. I justified it endlessly to myself. It's just coffee. People have coffee with friends all the time. It doesn't mean anything. But I knew deep down, I knew this wasn't just coffee. This was testing the waters, dipping a toe into a current wasn't sure I could swim back from. I texted Tyler some vague excuse about meeting an old colleague. The lie felt clumsy and stuck in my throat, but he just grunted an okay from the couch, eyes glued to his screen. He didn't even ask who. The ease with which I could deceive him sent a fresh wave of guilt crashing over me, mixed sickeningly with a pang of resentment. See? He doesn't even care enough to ask. The thought felt like fuel, pushing me towards the door. The coffee shop was bustling, noisy, the clatter of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, snippets of a dozen conversations swirling around. I saw Kevin sitting at a small table near the back, and my breath hitched. He looked different in person, more solid, more real than his profile picture. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes, and for a moment, the noise faded. The guilt receded slightly. Sitting across from him felt strangely natural, unnervingly easy. The conversation flowed just like it had online, maybe even better. He leaned in when I spoke, his attention solely focused on me. He laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions, shared stories about himself with an openness I hadn't experienced in so long. It was intoxicating. For that hour, maybe hour and a half, I wasn't lonely, Megan, drifting in a silent apartment. I was interesting, funny, desired. Someone worth listening to. The contrast between this easy connection and the strained silence I shared with Tyler was jarring, almost physically painful. It highlighted everything I felt was missing, everything I craved. Coffee turned into more. Neither of us wanted to leave. The air between us crackled with an undeniable energy, a chemistry that went beyond witty banter. There was a moment, a pause in the conversation, where we just looked at each other, and the unspoken thing hanging between us became tangible, heavy. His hand brushed mine as he reached for a sugar packet, a fleeting touch, but it sent an electric shock straight through me. My heart hammered against my ribs. All the rationalizations, all the carefully constructed justifications about just coffee crumbled into dust. This wasn't innocent. It hadn't been for a while, maybe not ever. We left the coffee shop, but didn't part ways. We walked aimlessly at first, conversation quieter now, charged with a different kind of intensity. We ended up back at his place. The decision wasn't really spoken aloud, more of a mutual drift, a magnetic pull that felt both inevitable and utterly terrifying. Stepping across his threshold felt like the definitive crossing of that line I'd been nervously towing. There was no going back now. What happened next? It felt like a dam breaking. Months, maybe years, of suppressed longing, of feeling invisible and untouched, just unleashed. It was intense, consuming, a desperate affirmation that I was still desirable, still capable of feeling passion. It wasn't gentle or romantic like the early days with Tyler. It was raw, urgent, almost frantic. In that moment, wrapped up in sensation and the shock of Kevin's undivided attention, the guilt was temporarily silenced, drowned out by the sheer physical and emotional intensity. He touched me like he genuinely wanted me, looked at me like I was the only person in the world. It was a potent, addictive feeling after starving for so long. But the second it was over, the silence that fell wasn't comforting. It was chilling. Lying there, listening to the sound of his breathing beside me, the full weight of what I'd done crashed down on me with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't some romantic escape. This was real. I had cheated on Tyler. The man, who, despite everything, was still my partner, the man whose tired sighs I knew by heart, the man I had built a life with. The adrenaline rush faded, replaced by a cold, sickening wave of nausea and regret. The intensity I'd craved moments before now felt cheap, reckless. I looked around Kevin's unfamiliar apartment, saw his life scattered around me, and felt, like an intruder, completely disconnected. What had I done? The image of Tyler's face flashed in my mind, not the distant, withdrawn Tyler of recent months, but the Tyler who'd held my hand through fevers, the Tyler who'd made me laugh, until I cried. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. The fleeting validation I'd felt with Kevin evaporated, leaving behind only the stark, ugly reality of my actions and the terrifying uncertainty of what came next. The fracture I'd sensed before, it felt like it had just split wide open. Leaving Kevin's apartment felt like stepping out of a fever dream and into harsh, unforgiving daylight. The city sounds, the traffic, the distant sirens felt amplified, grating. Every person I passed on the street felt like they could see right through me, like the guilt was stamped on my forehead. My own reflection in shop windows looked alien, haunted. The walk home, usually a quick 10-minute affair, felt like miles. Each step was heavy, reluctant. What was I walking back to? How could I possibly face Tyler? How could I sit in our living room, on our couch, knowing what I had just done? The air felt thick, hard to breathe. I remember gripping my keys so tightly, in my pocket, that the edges dug painfully into my palm. A small, sharp pain that briefly anchored me in the overwhelming sea of nausea and self-loathing. I felt irrevocably changed, damaged, like I'd taken something whole and deliberately smashed it on the pavement. When I finally reached our apartment door, I hesitated for a long time, hand hovering over the lock. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the key in and turned it as quietly as possible. The apartment was dark, silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Tyler was asleep on the couch, the TV remote lying loosely in his hand, casting flickering blue shadows across his face. Seeing him there, so unsuspecting, so normal, while my world had just imploded, was like a physical blow. The urge to wake him up, confess everything, and face the explosion was almost overwhelming, but cowardice, or maybe a twisted sense of self-preservation, kept me silent. I crept past him, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the bookshelf. I slipped into our bedroom, closed the door gently, and leaned against it, finally letting out the shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The familiar scent of our room, his t-shirt thrown over the chair, the photos on the nightstand, it all felt tainted now, viewed through the lens of my betrayal. Sleep was impossible. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every touch, every lie, until the first gray light of dawn seeped through the blinds. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and hollow interactions. I moved through our life like a ghost, performing normalcy, making coffee, asking about his day, watching TV side by side on the couch. The mundane routines felt like torture. Every casual touch from Tyler, every shared glance, sent jolts of guilt through me. He remained largely oblivious, still wrapped up in his own stress, which was both a relief and an agony. His distance, the very thing that had pushed me away, now felt like a shield, protecting me from the confrontation I dreaded, but also reinforcing the chasm between us. Did I talk to Kevin again? Yes. Shamefully, yes. A few texts, stilted, awkward messages trying to process what happened, trying to understand the confusing mix of feelings. Part of me wanted to erase it, pretend it never happened. Another part, the part still stinging from loneliness, felt a strange pull, a reminder that someone, somewhere, had seen me. It was a confusing, messy internal landscape. Mostly, though, I just felt sick, anxious, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it did. About 3 weeks later. My period, usually clockwork reliable, was late. At first, I brushed it off. Stress, right? My life was nothing but stress right now. But when a few more days passed, a cold dread started to seep into my bones. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work, hiding it in my bag like contraband. I waited until Tyler was deeply engrossed in a video game, headset on, completely tuned out. Standing in the bathroom, staring at that little plastic stick, waiting for the lines to appear, it felt like an eternity. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. And then, there it was. Positive. Unmistakably positive. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Pregnant. The word echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the bathroom. Pregnant. It wasn't joy or excitement that hit me. It was pure, unadulterated panic. A tidal wave of fear so intense it almost knocked me off my feet, because the immediate, horrifying follow-up question slammed into my brain with the force of a physical impact. Whose baby was it? The timing. It was agonizingly close. It could be Tyler's. It should be Tyler's. We hadn't been careful lately, the distance between us extending even to that intimacy. But it could also, terrifyingly, be Kevin's. The possibility hung there, a monstrous, unthinkable scenario. My mind raced, trying to calculate dates, cycles, possibilities, but it was all a jumbled mess of panic and nausea. The secret I was already carrying felt suddenly monumental, impossibly heavy. What could I possibly do? Telling Tyler felt like detonating a bomb in the middle of our already crumbling life. The truth would destroy him, destroy us, everything. We'd built everything we still were, however fragile. But lying? Keeping the secret, potentially raising a child whose paternity was uncertain, maybe even deceiving Tyler about the most fundamental connection? The weight of that felt suffocating, a different kind of destruction. Just as this spiral of panic threatened to consume me, Tyler called out from the living room, something mundane about ordering pizza. His voice, so normal, so unaware, pierced through my terror. And in that instant, a terrible protective instinct kicked in. Seeing his oblivious face later that evening, talking about maybe taking that road trip we'd postponed, a flicker of the old hope in his eyes. How could I shatter that? How could I inflict that kind of pain? The thought of telling him the truth felt like an act of cruelty. And so, the seed of the biggest deception of my life was planted, watered by fear and a desperate, misguided desire to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing my own truth, trapping myself in an impossible situation. The positive test strip felt like a verdict, condemning me to a future built on a terrifying, precarious lie. Telling Tyler about the pregnancy. That was surreal. I chose a moment when he seemed relaxed, less stressed than usual. I remember rehearsing the words in my head, trying to sound genuinely happy, trying to push down the icy tendrils of fear and deceit that were coiling in my stomach. His reaction was everything I'd dreaded and, in a twisted way, hoped for. His eyes widened, then crinkled into a huge smile, the first truly uncomplicated, joyful smile I'd seen from him in months. He pulled me into a hug, lifting me off the ground, laughing. "Are you serious, Meg? Really?" He was ecstatic, absolutely over the moon, and every ounce of his happiness felt like another stone added to the weight on my chest. His joy was predicated on a lie, my lie. It felt like celebrating a victory built on quicksand. Those early months of pregnancy were a tightrope walk over a chasm. Doctor's appointments became exercises in careful omission and redirection. His innocent questions about timelines or conception felt like navigating a minefield. Every kick, every milestone that should have been pure joy was tainted by the gnawing uncertainty, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety. Was I celebrating Tyler's child, or was I unknowingly celebrating Kevin's? The not knowing was a specific kind of torture. There was this one evening. Tyler came home with a small, awkwardly wrapped gift. It wasn't my birthday, not an anniversary. He just looked at me, his eyes softer than they'd been in a long time, and said, "I know things have been rough, Meg. I know I haven't been present. But this baby, it's a wake-up call. It's everything. You're everything." Inside the box was a delicate silver locket. Simple, beautiful. He helped me put it on, his fingers brushing against my neck. In that moment, the lie felt impossibly cruel. His vulnerability, his renewed hope for us, pinned directly onto this pregnancy. It was suffocating. I wanted to shatter the facade, scream the truth, burn it all down just to escape the crushing weight of pretending. But I looked at his hopeful face, the relief mingling with excitement, and the words wouldn't come. The lie had taken root, and tearing it out now felt like it would destroy him completely. So I smiled, thanked him, and felt the cold metal of the locket against my skin like a brand. As for Kevin, I cut ties. Completely. It had to be done. It was a difficult, messy conversation, filled with unspoken things, but it was necessary. Continuing any contact felt like playing with fire near a leaking gas line. Erasing him felt like trying to erase a part of my own story, a part that led directly to the precipice I was now living on. But it was the only way to even attempt to maintain the fiction I was building for Tyler. So where does that leave us now? As of today, Saturday, April 19th, 2025. Life is complicated. The baby, our beautiful, healthy baby, is here. And Tyler, he's an amazing father, attentive, loving, completely devoted. Seeing him with the baby fills my heart with a warmth that's terrifyingly real, yet simultaneously shadowed by the what if. He stepped up. He's more present, more engaged than he had been in a long time before the pregnancy. In some ways, the baby brought us closer, forced us to reconnect, to function as a team again. Our apartment doesn't feel quite so silent anymore. It's filled with baby sounds, laughter, the bustle of new parenthood. But the silence inside me persists. The question mark over our child's paternity hangs there, an invisible presence in every family photo, every shared smile, every whispered, "I love you." I live with a constant, low-level fear of accidental discovery, of a stray comment or a medical emergency revealing the truth I've guarded so fiercely. Some days are easier than others. Some days I can almost convince myself that it doesn't matter, that love makes a family, that I did the right thing by protecting Tyler's happiness, preserving our fragile peace. But other days, the guilt is a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I look at Tyler, so blissfully unaware, and I feel like a fraud. I look at our child, this incredible little person, and I wonder if I've condemned them to a life built on a fundamental untruth. I made a choice, actually a series of choices, born out of loneliness, desperation, and a misguided attempt to control an uncontrollable situation. I crossed lines I never thought I would cross and built a wall of lies thinking it would protect us. But sometimes it feels like I just built myself a prison. Love, I've learned, is far more complex and far messier than the fairy tales suggest. And sometimes the choices we make to protect the ones we love end up hurting ourselves, and potentially them, in ways we never anticipated. I carry this secret every single day. It's shaped who I am, how I interact with the world, how I see myself. Maybe one day the truth will come out, maybe it won't. But the weight of it, the what-ifs, they're mine to bear. So that's my story. Or at least this chapter of it. It's raw, it's complicated, and I know parts of it are hard to hear, maybe hard to understand. But I have to ask, what would you have done in my situation? Faced with that impossible choice, the truth versus the lie, knowing the potential damage of both? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear different perspectives. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about the messy, complicated realities of life and relationships, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. Thanks for listening.